Did you coin this, or did someone else come up with it?
I came up with it independently, but someone may have also.
So you're coining it now. This is trademarked.
It's happening now. I think Austin could be the next SAT city. So short for
here.
satellite. Yeah.
Where will we take off for the space industry of the 21st century? When America went to the moon in the 1960s, it did more than just that. It built a geography of space on Earth. Launch on the Florida coast, mission control in Houston, aerospace design and manufacturing in Southern California, and rocket propulsion and engineering in Huntsville, Alabama. These choices shaped where talent, suppliers, capital, and prestige accumulated for decades. Now space is back with Artemis 2 and a return to the moon in 2028, Mars, and onward. It's not just a patriotic or human or existential question, but an industrial one. So today we're going to talk about the legacy of American industrialization of space on Earth, why it happened, where it did, and where the next space city might take hold. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Jen.
And this is Build Order.
Today we have a very special guest and a local friend of the show with us, Lucy Wu. She hails from the aerospace industry and previously spent time at an early stage startup in Long Beach, California. She's also a Houston native. We met while both living in Houston, and a Longhorn alumnus and just a longtime dear friend of mine. So we're very excited to have you here, Lucy.
I'm very excited too. I'm really glad you guys invited me. I have a quick disclaimer here. So any views I share are mine alone.
So to understand the space industry in the US, there are 4 places you really need to know: Cape Canaveral, Los Angeles, Huntsville, Alabama, and Houston. Okay, let's start with Cape Canaveral. It's best understood as the primary launch node. The first missile launched from Cape Canaveral on July 24th, 1950, the Bumper 8 rocket. And the best way to understand Cape Canaveral is that it's a product of its geography. It's as close to the equator as was feasible within the constraints that we had. And rockets obviously gain extra velocity from the Earth's rotation, so that's geographically desirable. There's ocean access and low density flying east over the Atlantic Ocean, so it kind of met the safety criteria. There's an abandoned naval base there. At the time there was. And so there were roads and infrastructure that they could immediately use when they were looking for a launch site. The area was mostly underdeveloped at the time. It was scrubland and coastal barrier islands. And then generally there's mild weather in Florida year round, although obviously there are hurricanes. Next, we have Los Angeles or Southern California. That's the aerospace design and build cluster. Large aerospace firms, defense relationships, satellites, propulsion, and the space beach ecosystem around Long Beach and El Segundo. If Cape Canaveral was a product of geography, then Space Beach is really a product of history. The first air show in the country happened there January 10th to 20th, 1910. The Wright brothers were there, though they didn't fly. William Boeing was there, the founder of the Boeing Company. Donald Douglas, he was the founder of the Douglas Aircraft Company. He built the first plane to fly around the world in 1924, and he created the DC-3, which, if you know anything about the aerospace industry, revolutionized air travel. Glenn Martin was also there. So his company merged into what is now known as Lockheed Martin. By 1928, over 20 airframe and engine manufacturers were located in SoCal. And then in World War II, obviously the defense industry skyrocketed, and sort of the rest is history. And then the third one I want to talk about is Huntsville, Alabama. So Huntsville is known as Rocket City. It's the nation's premier hub for rocket propulsion, NASA engineering, you have the Marshall Space Flight Center there, and military defense. Huntsville's a product of chance and timing. So after World War II, the US secretly moved about 1,600 German engineers to the US. It's called Operation Paperclip. And one of these...
That's a funny name.
I don't even know how they came up with that name.
It just makes me think of the Microsoft little paperclip that's like helping you.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Well, one of these paperclips was Dr. Werner von Braun, who's one of the fathers of rocketry. And so he's credited with launching the first rocket to space, the V2 rocket in Germany. And after World War II, the Army found itself with a lot of surplus manufacturing sites, one of which was in Huntsville, and they were thinking about decommissioning it. It was actually a chemical warfare production site. So it had extensive infrastructure and river access. So it was sort of perfect for rocket and missile technology creation. So in 1950, they had this site and they needed a site. And Braun and his team were moved to Huntsville's Redstone Arsenal. And that's where the Saturn V rocket was invented, which brought us to the moon. And last but not least, we have Houston, which is known as the command node. Astronaut training, mission planning, spacecraft development oversight, and of course, mission control. And that was a product of national selection. Well, so why'd they pick Houston?
Essentially, they outgrew their Langley research facilities in Hampton, Virginia. So there was a special committee formed to try to figure out where this next site should be, and they had a few different decision factors. The first was talent and excellent research capabilities, which Houston does have with Rice University. Land to expand into, come on, we're Texas. But also, Rice donated over 1,000 acres, and there was another 600 nearby that was available for purchase. So that definitely went in Houston's favor. Houston seemed like the logical choice if you just look at the decision factors, and hindsight is 2020. But the reason it seems like the logical option is because of the political sway that went into making sure they had the best application and put the best foot forward. And this is the most fascinating part of the Houston selection story. Lyndon B. Johnson, who was vice president of the time, gets the most credit for pushing it forward, hence the name, the Johnson Space Center. He chaired the National Aeronautics and Space Council, which oversaw NASA policy, ultimately influencing the search team. He actually ensured that Houston's proposal was the best before it ever got submitted because he was able to take a peek at the others. He will deny this, as the other politicians involved did, but that's the assumption based on the research that I read. So the other politicians that helped him out included Representative Albert Thomas from Houston, who is also a Democrat and Texan. This guy is really the linchpin to Houston's success because he went to Rice University. And guess who his roommate was? You'll never guess. I did not know who this guy was.
If I'll never guess, I'm going to lend it to you.
His name was George Brown. He became a construction magnate and very successful in the oil and gas industry. Ultimately became the chairman of the Rice Board of Governors. He arranged in his role as the chairman, and because of his influence in the oil and gas industry, he arranged for the Humble Oil and Refining Company, which, do you guys know what that ultimately became? ExxonMobil. Oh. So he arranged for ExxonMobil to donate 1,020 acres of land near Clear Lake, which is a suburb of Houston, to Rice University with the stipulation that it be donated to NASA. Aha. Yes, exactly. Because if it was a corporate donation buying government dollars and government spend, that would look bad. But politically, if it comes from a university, it looks really great
Sneaky.
on a proposal. So sneaky. But the last political figure who also had a huge role in this was President Kennedy himself. Douglas Brinkley is a Rice University professor, and he recently published a book called American Moonshot. In it, and I'm going to quote this because I thought it was a really powerful statement. If you look at where all the money went for NASA in Kennedy's years, it went to states like Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida. This was vulnerable territory for Kennedy. This, meaning selecting Houston as the manned spacecraft center, was going to be big government technology dollars anchored on the space program, and JFK poured that money into the southern states, protecting and hopefully centralizing his position to win the presidency again.
That's super interesting. I didn't know that. I find the whole thing really fascinating because most of the other kind of key sites that we know, in fact, well, truly aside from Houston, they're all a product of just Army planning, kind of going through the checklist, or just this historical velocity like Los Angeles. where there was just such a concentration of talent and industry that was so natural that there would be a space industry there. It's fascinating to me that, I mean, mission control seems to me that it could be anywhere. So I find it very interesting and validating that it sounds like, okay, this was just like really good politics.
Oh, extremely good politics. It was basically, we are going to have the meeting before the meeting and decide where we think the best place, and the we being LBJ, Representative Albert Thomas, and probably JFK as well.
Well, so how does it differ to work in the space industry in Austin versus Los Angeles in your experience?
So I will say it is smaller here in Austin, and it could also just be that it's spread out. But if you think about LA's history, it's much more ingrained, and the talent was much more dense for a longer period of time. When I lived in LA, it was very easy to identify networking opportunities in the space domain, and even where I worked. So I worked in Long Beach. I worked in an office building across from an iconic DC Jets sign in Long Beach, and this area was where a number of McDonnell Douglas buildings were, and there's it's called Douglas Park, and so literally there's other. It's like a 1 to 2 mile stretch. There's other space launch startups there. There's Virgin Galactic. There's Rocket Lab, Relativity. And so in that space, there's also a hangar and there's a food court, and you could just be standing in line with the engineers who are part of redefining the future of space. So it's not so much of like a common experience or exposure in Austin. I actually have some data points on funding for this. And so in LA, there's probably I'd say about, if you include SpaceX, $30 billion of funding since SpaceX was founded in 2002. And there's over 30 startups headquartered and founded there. So you can see where the plethora of space talent is largely homogenous there and rooted. Now in Texas, we don't, and specifically Austin, the numbers aren't as high. The startups that are headquartered here and founded here, they're probably in the single digit. Now,
is this all time, or is this over the last
This is
decade,
just since 2002. I'm going to use SpaceX founding as a cutoff because they did commercialize space launch and made it much more, I don't like this word, but democratized. And
their engineers have seeded a lot of the startups.
Right. And yes, and they've
across the country.
You can almost call it like the SpaceX or the Starlink mafia, and they've kind of pollinated these hubs, these new space hubs. And some of the cities you mentioned, there's kind of like the legacy space hubs, but if you think about like Washington, Denver, Austin, I mean, and LA, of course, itself, there are these kind of SpaceX alumni that have moved on to new ventures and new projects. But essentially in Austin, so there's a single digit number of startups based on public information that have announced private funding. And that funding is probably around 2 to 3 billion in total.
Okay.
And compare that to like the startups
That's a lot for not many startups. I mean,
but it's a tenth of El Segundo. So if that's a $30 billion, this is market capitalized, or an estimate of the value of all the startups.
Funding raised, just year to date funding raised, private funding. Obviously, Firefly went public not too long ago, so that number, that 870 million IPO, is excluded. But private funding is critical to pushing all these efforts in this space innovation that we're starting to see again. And I'll just say, even like when I worked in Long Beach, that 1 to 2 mile strip had probably 2 to 3 billion in funding. And then you think of the size of Austin, it's like we're not yet seeing that funding in that same radius anywhere. But I will say there's a different way to look at this, because you guys are both real estate professionals. I'll call it acreage takeover.
Yeah.
And so on that note, in LA, there's over 30 companies that have been founded and started in LA since SpaceX, and they probably have about 4 million of square footage, or 100 acres, dedicated to space operations, flight testing, and design and assembly. But if you think about Austin, so ignore Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. In Austin, Firefly Aerospace, they have 200 acres for their rocket ranch. SpaceX, specifically Starlink, is looking to expand into a total of 50 acres. They already have a footprint in Austin, Bastrop, but that's looking to grow up to 50. acres. And then recently announced was Bezos' Blue Origin. Blue Origin is looking to expand into 100 acres for both manufacturing and logistics purposes around Blue Origin. So you're looking at over 300 acres and then probably under the next 5 years. And that is, so when you ask what does Austin look like relative to other places in terms of becoming a space city, it's got a lot of hope. It's got a lot of potential. Some of that potential has already been realized, I'll say.
I can see pros and cons. Like, you obviously need high acreage if you're gonna actually do production, but having everyone bumping into each other on 1 acre from all these 5 companies, I would think would really spark innovation. So, well, and then on the production side, I mean, everyone always talks about, well, people talk about Shenzhen a lot because one of the advantages in China has been that hardware and construction is just next to software, so you can iterate quite quickly. So I can see pros and cons for both like the Long Beach and the sort of Austin more space model.
Yeah, I mean, there are companies that are, even though they're not headquartered or founded here in Austin, they are looking to expand their footprint into Austin because of this space. There's a company called Umbra Space. They have recently expanded to Austin. There's a British company called Pulsar Fusion. They're also looking to expand their footprint, not just into the US, but also specifically into Austin. It is because of that potential behind the land and the access to that for just a full stack design, development, deployment, production.
Is it talent too? Like the people who know how to build these or the people who know how to operate these centers are here in Texas or in Austin?
It's probably cheaper to move talent. I think that is what is appealing. It's not so much that the talent is here. So for instance, the current CEO of Firefly was actually the former CEO or president at Millennium Systems, which is a Boeing business, and that was in El Segundo. And so there's the appeal of how can we relocate talent to Austin, which is, I think, also the theme of just Silicon Valley and talent from there moving into what we call probably Silicon Hills.
Yeah. So it's space, it's the talent, or it's cheaper to move here. UT doesn't hurt.
Yeah, UT
having
is
that nearby.
A significant contributor to talent, for not just in aerospace engineering, but astronomy, mathematics, geosciences, zoology, microbiology. There's a component of space that's isn't just confined to space itself, the technology there, but it's also
the science,
human health, right?
And health.
Or botany. Everyone who saw The Martian knows how important botany is.
We need to grow potatoes on Mars. Yeah, that's right. There's a good agriculture program at UT as well, right? It's like one of the best in the country.
And Texas A&M too, not too far away.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think with Los Angeles, I mean, one thing I'm taking away is that in the 60s, the cost differential between operating out of California and out of Texas was not as great. Actually, it was a really great place, California, from a cost of living and a lifestyle perspective. Everyone was flocking to California at the time. So it could it just be as simple as that Austin didn't really get its chance to shine in the shadow of Gemini in the 60s, but now people are just doing the math and companies are saying, well, it's more affordable and that, if you're a startup, I mean, everything comes down to run rate and how long you have to survive to prove that you can build a commercial market. So why not Austin?
Yeah, and I do think that the appeal of the talent from the technology space is critical here because that wasn't accessible so much back in the 60s, 70s, probably not until the 80s. And now it's evolved so much more significantly. I remember in college, there's a neighborhood called Riverside, and that's where the Oracle campus was, or is, not was. But essentially, those all used to be apartments and it's kind of like a dorm extension. But now it's a campus, and that's just 10 years of difference. And so I think that appeal of the potential behind that talent cultivation is highly encouraging to these outsiders who are looking to expand their footprint in space. And then it's close to UT, which has partnerships and grants for their pursuit and research and innovation in the space domain. And then a couple 100 miles away, you've got Johnson Space Center.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we'd be remiss to not talk about Elon Musk and his influence in trying to move all of space to Austin, if not quite a bit of it, the space industry. So what do you think about his role in it? We've talked about the talent, having enough area to move around in, but what about Elon Musk?
I mean, the space in LA is not the way it was back in the 60s and 70s. It's obviously overpopulated now, and there is more space here, and whether it's just Texas generally or Austin. If you think about satellite manufacturing, assembly, the production, the logistics, that's all together. It's ideal to have that in one place. So there's a tactical decision in expanding Starlink in Austin, and they didn't pick Austin; they picked Bastrop technically,
Right.
which is
It's a suburb, effectively,
it's
at this
a suburb.
point.
Yeah.
40 minutes, maybe 30 if you're going at over 80 miles per hour, which is a thing here in Texas and in Austin.
A legal
Not that
thing
far.
here in Texas.
Yes, illegal. So illegal, not illegal, illegal. And I'm sure having Tesla operations here makes a difference too. There's potentially some type of aggregation or consolidation appeal. The most important person at SpaceX behind Elon Musk, Gwynne Shotwell, she's from Dallas, or at least spent
I
some
didn't know
time
that.
there,
I
and
didn't know
so
that
she's a COO. And if he's kind of the poster boy, let's just say, of visionary of SpaceX, she's behind.
She's one right. Yeah.
Yeah,
running
she's
the show.
behind that visionary and the execution of it. So there's a lot of reasons to move to Texas. I don't think it's just to make a statement necessarily.
Yeah, let's talk about. I find the story of SpaceX and the geography of its build really instructive. So it was founded, SpaceX, in March 2002 in El Segundo. After 3 initial failures, Falcon 1 became the first privately held liquid fuel rocket to reach orbit in September 2008. And then SpaceX didn't, foray or go into Texas until McGregor, which is closer to Waco than Austin. What they did is they built their rocket engine testing facility there in 2003. So it was actually pretty close to the foundation of the company. So literally 1 year later, they recognized something in the dynamics of California and Texas that they did their testing there. And then it wasn't until much later, so August 2014, that SpaceX chose Boca Chica, which is at the southernmost tip of Texas, for their new launch site, and everyone knows this as Starbase. So the best way to think about the geography of SpaceX is Los Angeles Hawthorne, so that's their Rocket spacecraft design build center for Falcon Dragon era rockets, their engineering base, their operational campus. But they do have these sites now in Texas, including in Austin, for the Starlink manufacturing and anything that's semiconductor related, which makes a lot of sense based on Austin's pedigree. But when I saw this story, I mean, my question that came to my mind was, did SpaceX outgrow California? Or did it, flee California for Texas?
Well, I think they outgrew for sure. I think they outgrew California. I mean, there's this gas station called Buc-ee's. It's extremely popular. There's a stop in Bastrop for it. When I lived in LA and in Long Beach, there were a large number of professionals in the space industry who enjoyed wearing or sporting a Buc-ee's t-shirt, which is like something I did in high school. Like that was trendy back then. But for them,
It's always trendy. It's timeless. Come on.
Yes, it is. The beef jerky is a hit. You guys should get sponsored. I will say this, there are elements of just Texas and its kind of Western thematic associations that are very appealing to these professionals that might want to disassociate with some of the other hubs in LA. And so I once heard there's a French guy who's like viral on Instagram. He calls it Tech Western. But that's kind of this association that I think some of these, or a large number of these space professionals who work at SpaceX or for Starlink, they are intrigued by. And there's an element of just like this novel town for space, this novel hub. And I do think it's outgrown. I don't think it was the other option. What was the other option?
Well, it's that Elon Musk was wanting to leave California.
Yeah.
There's the billionaire tax in California now too that a
Yeah.
lot of people have
that's
vacated
personal.
California for. Yes, it's personal, but he does run the company.
That
so
is true.
He brought all
does
his
make the
companies
decisions
here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
It's-
it's tactical.
It's probably a combination of the two.
Yeah.
They outgrew, so it was either buy more space
Yeah.
in that area of El Segundo or somewhere in California, or go somewhere else
It
that's
does
cheaper.
feel like a combination, because when you see that they built a rocket testing site in Texas very early on,
Yeah.
and that's been here for a while. I feel like 2003 we weren't talking about as much the differences politically and economically between California and Texas. It wasn't as heated a topic, or it wasn't as much in the public eye. So it seems like maybe just taking out a spreadsheet, there was always that advantage in building some things in Texas.
True. I love the analogy of it being the Wild West, and that is what Texas is known for. If you travel internationally and you say you're from Texas, they're like, "Why aren't you wearing cowboy boots? Where's your cowboy?
Where's your
hat?
little rocket now
Where's
too?
your, yeah, where's your little rocket?" Well, I mean, space is called the final frontier, right?
Yeah.
I love that analogy.
Do you think that the fact that the Falcon and Dragon era spacecraft, like design, engineering, that's just a function of the fact that they started there and El Segundo has this history, and so it was sort of entrenched, and that's why SpaceX has left it there because there's so many employees? Or do you think that there's a really good reason to keep that type of engineering and build and talent in California?
Part of it is the programs, the university programs that feed talent into that locale. And so when I graduated University of Texas, this was in 2012, I moved to LA. And so I had some friends who used to work for Raytheon, and they moved to SpaceX because it was the aerospace startup to go and join and see if there's something out there. And Raytheon had a presence, or still has a presence in El Segundo, Boeing, Northrop. So not just the talent from the universities, but the talent that were already professionally established were out there. Whereas most of what you see in Austin, this is mostly talent from startups, and then of course the University of Texas and the local universities in Texas as well.
So there's such a deep talent bench. It's kind of hard to unseat that when you sort of win at that game from the city perspective.
I would say yes and no, because Rice University formed the first ever space science department in 1963. So this was right after they were selected. So it's not like they had a space science department before the Manned Spacecraft Center was put in Houston.
But do you think that's because that was brand new, like a new industry, a new thing to explore, whereas the spacecraft engineering and build is very much like within the legacy of the aircraft industry and innovation that happened in SoCal?
I mean,
basically-
space is part of aerospace, right? Like, it's just a matter of how low do you want to go.
Yeah.
And then it really is strictly aviation versus
right.
space.
True.
But space is part of aerospace, and much of the aerospace talent was in SoCal, in that Long Beach hub. You mentioned McDonnell Douglas
Yeah.
and Hughes Aviation as well. And so that, I think, the roots or the principles behind space, which is largely rooted in aerospace, was there. But again, to your point, if there's a new territory to explore, extraterrestrial territory, you could really start anywhere. So that's, I think, the other element to potentially pushing for Houston.
Is that what's going on now with all of these new space startups in Austin, or is there some other like why build here when the whole aerospace aircraft engineering pedigree is in SoCal? Like, why would you build here? Not from one. And if the answer is like your personal preference, lifestyle, that's totally an answer. But I'm curious if there's like a durable industry advantage to doing it here.
The startups that are also looking at Austin are weighing in the footprint that SpaceX and Blue Origin have today, because they're thinking about future talent that could move into their organization and be a part of leading the next wave of innovation that they want to introduce into the space domain. And for them, it's not just about space launch. We equate Houston to Space City.
Yeah.
That's because of the mission control, and that mission control, those operations are tied to the launch But there's so much more to space and the design behind the vehicles that take human spaceflight into space. And so that's where I feel like if you think about space launch, you think about space components, spacecraft, the satellites, which are also spacecraft. That entire kind of stack is not intended to be only confined in somewhere like Southern California or somewhere near waters necessarily. So Austin is extremely appealing.
Well, and I think I've heard you refer to all of the satellite tech coming to Austin. You had a name that you coined for Austin too, right, Lucy?
Yeah.
Did you coin this or did someone else come up with it?
I came up with it independently, but someone may have also.
So you're coining it now. This is trademarked.
It's happening now. I think Austin could be the next SAT city. So short for satellite. And and that's in due part to Starlink. And if Blue Origin is coming here, then Amazon Leo might just be next. And obviously there's other, I mean, look at Cesium Astro. They have a footprint here. They're in spacecraft manufacturing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bets that one can take in Sat City in Austin.
Well, let's talk about that. So I think a good place to land the ship, if you will, is what's the next city that could be a space city? Okay, I looked up the top 20 venture deals done in space tech and aerospace in the last 12 months. Altogether, they netted $4.5 billion from the startups that I selected. 22% of the funding and 70% of the deals were in SoCal. So interesting, because clearly there were some really big deals that happened outside of SoCal, but there's still this intense concentration in SoCal if you had, 3/4 of the deals done there. Obviously, there's some big ones in Austin. So you have Cesium Astro. They just had a huge raise. You have Firefly. We even have some companies like Icon, which is traditionally a 3D printed home company that we know well from the prop tech space, that have Icon Prime now, where they're building installations for defense, but also want to be able to help build a plant or a base, if you will, on the moon using native material.
Yeah, I mean, they're working with NASA. They have a physical location within the Johnson Space Center campus, and it's called this habitat for Mars. Martian habitat is called Mars Dune Alpha, and it was built by Icon. And so there's this dual purpose element to this. I think intrinsically real estate business.
So do you think that Austin could be the next space city, or do you think Icon and maybe some of these other companies are a sign of dual use industry?
I definitely dual use industry, and I actually have a few examples of that. But I will say, if we're talking about could Austin be the next space city, I will say it is the next space city.
Okay.
They're still next.
Tell me why.
They're still next. I mean, if you look at SpaceX and you look at Blue Origin, if they don't have a footprint, they're looking to establish one, which that's not even I wouldn't even describe it as a possibility. It's already a probability, if not a clear certainty. And other space, I mean, UT recently signed a partnership with the U.S. Space Force. And I think you guys probably know, but the Space Force was carved out of the Air Force, which is in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And with that carve out, essentially this Space Force Command is now in Huntsville, but they do not have to isolate what they do to Colorado, which is one of the new space cities too. And so I will say, just outside of just the UT hub and outside of SpaceX and Blue Origin, there are a few of these kind of innovators in Austin who are looking to contribute to the space research and then take that technology and put it into some type of commercial application. So I've got a few of these, and they actually date back to the 60s and 70s. There's a company here in Austin called Cellacor. They're a biomedical device company. They partnered with ILC Dover, who was behind the spacesuits for the Apollo program. Now, ILC Dover partnered with Cellacor to develop a product called Cellatherm, which utilizes spacesuit bonding technology to provide deep therapeutic heating for muscular stress and injury treatment. And so to translate that, think about compression boots today, which are pretty critical to sports science.
So Austin doesn't get enough credit for its existing contributions
No, they
to
don't.
the space industry.
And there's a lot of attention on UT, and naturally with SpaceX and Elon sharing a lot on his social media his preferred social media platform. There's a lot of rep there, but there's more, and a lot of it's just like picking apart those layers.
Although it's interesting with SpaceX because I feel like despite there being a long pedigree in space tech and a bunch of other startups, you know, it's nice, or maybe sometimes it's necessary that the myth precedes the industry. So, SpaceX is moving, so I gotta go to Austin. And did it kind of make it a thing?
I actually believe that the myth did precede the what was the other word?
Like the latest round of startups that have come to Austin.
The myth preceded the reality, because when I was in college and shortly after I graduated, when I saw that SpaceX was looking into Boca Chica, I remember thinking, okay, Austin is probably going to be the next extension of SpaceX. And at that time, I actually was living in LA, and I thought, well, there's a reason to make other people think that Austin is going to be legit. And I remember at the time when I moved from LA to Houston, and then from Houston to Austin, people would ask me why. And I would say, well, you know, there's something pretty legit about Austin. I mean, and I would.
There's all these signs.
Yeah, there are
if you're
these
looking
signs.
for them.
I was looking for, and you know, like, yes, a little bit of is like confirmation bias. But I think in your last episode, you talked about Nate Paul, who kind of created a bit of a myth. You know, he's probably hedging, but created this myth that people were moving to Austin and it was the next place to bet on. And maybe that has been a key driver in Austin's recent expansion is this myth actually coming into the fold.
I think it's a component for sure, the myth and the individual and the marketing and the hype. But I don't think you can get around the fact that Austin has these raw ingredients that you can utilize for multiple industries, which is like the talent, the way of life here. People want to live in Austin, like self-select into it, the cost, the manufacturing talent.
I mean, the potential energy is there. Like, if you talk about physics,
it's just you need to harness it. Like, what are you gonna So, okay, I have a different opinion, which is I actually think if I had to pick the next space city, like if I have to just pull up and shoot, I would probably say Denver, around Centennial, space like that, because, and you were mentioning it, the U.S. Air Force selected Denver for missile development in the 1950s because it was. Now, it's like the opposite of what we were talking about for launch, because it had a secure inland location for our missile capabilities. And then NORAD is there in Colorado Springs, and they host still U.S. Space Command to this day, although my understanding is there's talk about that moving to Huntsville, though it hasn't happened. Maybe it's even a little, I don't know. It seems a little contentious. I couldn't really get the pulse on that one. But Lockheed Martin's there, BAE, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and then there's also a host of startups in that area, and actually they pulled in more funding for the last 12 months than Austin did. So if I had to make an argument around space, I think I'd probably say them personally, but I 100% agree with you about Sat City and Austin and even just some of the companies that are here, because it truly is dual use what they're doing, and it's a lot of satellite development. And when I start thinking about the whole conversation around like data centers in space, and if that's going to happen, I mean, why wouldn't that happen here? A lot of the tech and the capabilities that you need are being built in Texas, more so than other places, arguably.
I mean, there's definitely satellite manufacturing in Denver and Colorado. To me, I don't see it as the next space city. I see it as a space city because of how Space Force carved out of Air Force and how there are space primes who have ingrained footprints in Denver. I think of Austin as a next space city. Next is the key adjective here.
So like Denver's already kind of a space city.
Denver's already, they have a pretty solid pool of talent there.
Yeah, I'd say the through line of both of your arguments of what will be the next space city, whether it's Austin for all the reasons that you've said or Denver for the reasons that you said, maybe instead of saying there's just one space city, like in the 60s when Houston became Space City, the space industry was not what it is today. The space industry today is so much broader than it was in the 1960s. We're not just trying to send people to the moon. We're trying to colonize Mars. We're trying to build data centers on the moon. Like there are so many more opportunities.
It's much richer.
It's much richer. So the idea,
and multidisciplinary.
Multidisciplinary. The idea that all of that would live in one city is short-sighted.
I think do you think it's a product of the history of Los Angeles that we're kind of looking and saying, okay, are they going to essentially keep their like domination of the aerospace and aviation industry, or do all these other places have a chance to take their lead? And I think we're only having this question because structurally Los Angeles has become a bit of a complicated place to build a business, from a tax, from a cost, from a talent perspective. And also the city's grown and isn't as livable as it used to be. So sometimes I think we're having this question because of that.
It's the same thing that's happening with software, Silicon Valley. Now you have these hubs all over the US, and Austin is one of them too, that is benefiting from people looking for lower cost places to live and start businesses in tech, whether it's software, as I mentioned, or maybe even hardware in this case. But in today's remote world, and where you can hop on a plane and be anywhere within a few hours, yes, living together, living in the same city, living on the same street in El Segundo, you bump into people a lot more. It's better for networking. But with what we do in the prop tech space and real estate, like it's just as easy to hop on a plane and go see someone that you want to see. And I imagine the same for you, Lucy. I know you travel quite a lot with your role in the space industry.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is there's going to be multiple new space cities, if not already in existence today. I think before there's, I think, about 4 or 5 cities that were kind of the legacy space hubs, and that consideration or that distinction is no longer confined or restricted to those cities. I think that the talent in Austin and both in Denver, there's so much to offer, and of course having space primes and aerospace, just these long-standing aerospace firms or giants just down the street definitely will cultivate the right talent. But I mean, if you go to somewhere like Firefly Aerospace, they're pulling in students who are freshly graduated. Like these kids are probably born in 2000 or after. Like they're not 90s babies.
And it's funny because actually it would be, if you were a startup, depending on who you are, and you don't want to have to compete with some of the more established startups in the space or SpaceX, you might set up shop next to a university like UT where you have first dibs on talent, because UT talent often wants to stay in Austin, hasn't historically had the opportunity. So that could be a strategic move.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think with Austin, so I think you guys talked about in one of your earlier podcasts how when probably we graduated college, the idea of working in Austin probably wasn't as feasible because the number of opportunities wasn't as densely available, and now that has changed. And I will also say in the domain of space, so back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of that was oriented around exploration and discovery. But today it is more about deployment and production. And when you think about what it takes to scale a space business to go public, to file for an IPO, you're not just talking about engineers and payload specialists or people who are focused on the design and or manufacturing elements. You're also looking at people who are on the business side. So I'm on more of the corporate side of businesses. I've been a part of fundraising. I've been a part of assessing transformation strategies for organizations and evaluating the financial liquidity of a business as well. And those are critical elements where businesses who want to expand, they want to scale, they have to look into building that talent and harvesting that talent too.
All right, last question. If you were a real estate professional and you were thinking about how to get in this game and be present in the kind of city that was building the next frontier of space, how would you think about that?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is still the Icon prop tech company, because not only are they building 3D homes here in Austin and other places throughout the US, they're also looking to build them on the moon, which is very exciting. From a real estate professional perspective, and I know, Lauren, you probably have some more thoughts on this, that there are plenty of manufacturing sites here in Austin. So you could definitely look at that as an investment opportunity. I would also say Elon Musk is going to keep pushing for colonizing Mars. And at some point, real estate professionals might want to grab their slice of the pie. As humans, that's our goal, right? Is to keep spreading.
Like, yeah, buy futures options on Mars.
Futures options on Mars. Or, when the metaverse was big and Jamestown bought Times Square in the metaverse, right? Is that going to be the next PR opportunity whenever we do send someone to Mars? Oh, which real estate firm is going to buy?
Yeah,
land?
advertising on Mars.
Exactly, yes. So what are your thoughts, Lauren?
I think that I would look at it like any industrials market in terms of where there might be ample space for manufacturing because they need huge footprints, right? Lucy, you were saying 300 acres just in Austin alone among this handpicked set of startups where you can get the power and water to be able to do that. But I think maybe you might end up looking at some cities that you aren't necessarily expecting because if you were thinking about this industry before, it would have brought you to Los Angeles, but now it might bring you to Denver, it might bring you to Austin, or even Huntsville is becoming a more popular place to live and obviously has a lot of NASA science and jobs there. So it might enlarge the playing field a little bit of where to invest.
It very well could. The other thing I was thinking of is I have a colleague who invests in airport hangars, and that has been a very profitable, growing industry to invest in these alternative real estate opportunities. When are we going to see rocket hangars for space tourism, right? Where are those going to be
Launch
around
pads.
the US?
I mean, they're going to be near the water.
Launch pad
Just
tourism.
near the water.
But I will say, I mean, I don't have a real estate background, but I will say if one were a real estate professional, if they're interested in tapping into the space market, especially with these larger space organizations that want to scale their footprint, naturally, obviously, you want to consider land and land use. They should look into site assessments in that domain because typically you need to have like there's site reviews that have to be conducted before you can go and launch your operations. I think the other thing that's like critical to national security is thinking about what building clearances would look like because it's not just a certification. There's a whole construct of what has to be implemented like for the building and around the building. Like you can't have many entryways into a specific like cleared site for national security purposes. The entries have to be pretty limited. There has to be a neighboring power supply. So you were talking about power earlier. So I feel like if a real estate professional were thinking about how do I target like a space clientele base and anticipate the next direction for where there could be very appealing use for the land that is available, and whether it's Texas, Colorado, they should also be thinking about what goes into a facility that is cleared by the government.
Yeah, that's really interesting because real estate investors have experience with environmental assessments. I imagine this might be a little bit different, but probably more in the ballpark of what you're used to. But the other point that you made around the clearances and how the buildings have to be built differently, to me seems that would be a net new concept for a lot of real estate investors who haven't obviously historically been in the business of leasing out large spaces to space tech companies, though some real estate investors, some more than others, have more experience with defense and government. So that would be a faster slope, I think, to ascend to get comfort with that. But that's really interesting. You would almost have to learn a little bit of a different industry, and that's happening more and more today in real estate with data centers as well. Everyone's just trying to figure it out. Well, this feels like a good place to stop for now.
What was something that you learned from our conversation or perhaps changed your mind about?
I was most surprised by the fact that LBJ is clearly behind every significant thing that happened in the 1960s, and this is just one more to add to my list. How about you?
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that. I was very surprised in his involvement. Obviously, I knew the Space Center was named after him in Houston. My takeaway, because both of you gave such interesting arguments for Austin being the next space city or Denver potentially, was that there is so much opportunity in the space industry, just in aerospace in general, with Austin becoming the next SAT city or the satellite city. Yes, exactly. But even beyond satellites, there's so many other opportunities for development on the moon or in Mars that limiting us to say one city is the next space city is not good enough. We need to be challenging ourselves in the US more. We should have 1,000 space cities. That's my big takeaway. What about you, Lucy?
You can be the next one to write the grants, I guess, for Texas.
I, as a Longhorn grad, I feel deeply proud about the alumni from UT that have been a part of contributing to the expansion of the space industry and the research there. I went down a rabbit hole in my research, and I used to think when I was a kid, the sky's the limit, and I don't think that sky is really the limit anymore. I mean, I didn't even start my career in aerospace, and that has taken a different direction now that I am in aerospace, and it's such a fascinating source of inspiration to see down the street that there's these students who are hungry to be part of redefining future in space, and to see the investment go in from just different facets and other functional capacities. And so I say this with like a lot of pride. So that's kind of what I'm taking away from just the research and this exchange.
That's a nice way to end. Well, we'll land the spaceship now. And so when you start looking at the space industry, it looks like the ultimate placeless industry in that the entire design is to leave the Earth. Why should it grow in one place over another? But the more that we've looked at it and researched it and talked about it, the more you realize how much place matters, whether it's Cape Canaveral or Houston, Los Angeles, Denver, Austin. Each city really tells a different story about how industries form and how cities form, whether it's through geography, through competitive national bidding and politics, whether it's sort of historical destiny in Los Angeles with the aerospace industry really being born there. And once an ecosystem compounds, it gets very hard to recreate it from scratch because of the stickiness of place and talent. So the real question for Austin and for all the other cities is perhaps not whether there's one space city title to win, but what part of the space economy in the future, a growing space economy that's diversifying, that it is well poised to dominate. And that's it for this time. We'll see you next time.